So, Days of Future Past, does that mean that this is Earth 811? I read House of X number 2, and just like you, I have a lot of thoughts and questions. So I'm just going to jump right into overthinking this one. I'm going to timestamp this episode and say that House of X number 2 just came out the week that I am recording this. There's a lot more of House of X and Powers of 10 to come, and so by the time you're watching this, everything I'm saying could be thrown on its head. But I am talking about House of X number 2 this week. This is written by Jonathan Hickman. It has art by Pepe Larraz, color art by Marte Gracia, and letters are by VC's Clayton Cowles. Also, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking all about this comic. Double also. I'm not going to give a complete recap of this issue in this episode. I'm going to assume that you have read this if you're watching this video, but I am going to give this very quick executive summary of the issue. House of X number 2 recounts the many lives of Moira McTaggart. I say many lives because we learn in this issue that Moira is a mutant. When she dies, she is reborn into her life, but she keeps the memories of her previous lives with her. It's like Groundhog's Day, except an entire life rather than a single day. And I'm going to jump right into my thoughts and questions about this issue. And again, House of X number 2 just came out. All of this could be completely undone by what's coming up in House of X and Powers of 10 by the time you're watching this video. Let's jump to it. How do Destiny and Mystique know? There's something going on there. There's got to be. The first thing on my mind is Destiny, Mystique, and Moira. And this is from Moira's third life, where she invents the mutant cure and is killed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Destiny and Mystique seem to know a lot more about Moira than they would if this was their first encounter with her, or if they went into this and discovered what her mutant ability was during this incident in her laboratory. They seem to know what her mutant power is ahead of time, and Mystique seems to know that they have something planned for Destiny to tell Moira about what's coming up in her lives. Especially is curious that they know this despite the fact that Destiny says that, you know, other mutants are blind to Moira and they can't detect or see her. So how is Destiny able to know so much about Moira and her life if she can't even see her in that moment in the lab? All this makes me think that there is something else going on, something more happening between Destiny and Moira that we haven't seen yet. So when Xavier knows the past, it leads to the faraway, isolation, and ultimately still Sentinels, which seem to be inevitable, as we learn there. Next thing I want to talk about is Moira V. She reveals herself to Charles Xavier, and this is the reality where Charles Xavier becomes extreme and creates the Faraway, a haven for mutants, but in the end, it is destroyed by the Sentinels. I only really bring this up because I'm going to come back to this later in the video, and I wanted to point it out that in this life, Moira revealed herself to Charles Xavier. Moira VI. This whole thing isn't here. Does Xavier know about 6, or do only we not know about 6? Who knows 6? Alright, so next, I think everyone noticed this one. Moira VI is conspicuously absent from the timeline and from the story in this issue. What happened in Moira VI's life? Does Charles Xavier know what happened? Or is this something that she's keeping secret from everyone? It's a big mystery that I am anxious to find an answer to. After the Moiracalypse, and then, what is missing here? Next up, Moira IX, the Moiracalypse. And yes, I just said that. In this, we see Moira joining forces with Apocalypse, having the Apocalypse War, and then there's something very interesting in the book. These two panels that say, and then, ... and then, ... Something else happened after the Apocalypse War that we aren't seeing in this book. And what could that be? Considering that the Moira IX timeline is shown to continue in that cool infographic in this book, I think that there's an interesting question about what else haven't we seen in the Moiracalypse timeline. Adding to this is the ominous quote at the very beginning of the book from Apocalypse. If you can find it in you to survive, if you are worthy, then I will make you into something more than them. Something eternal. So Xavier knows, but he knows that he knew, and he knew that Magneto knew. He knows that knowing is not enough. So now Moira X. This is it. When Marvel first promoted this series, they said that House of X and Powers of 10 would include the most significant scene in X-Men history. And this is likely it. And it is significant. The way I read this scene, it means that Moira revealed herself to Charles Xavier before he ever founded the X-Men in the history of the mainstream 616 Marvel universe. That means throughout the entire history of the X-Men, Charles Xavier has known about Moira's past lives, and even known that Moira revealed herself to him once before in the past, and knows all the lessons about what happened in all those different past lives. So that means that when Xavier founded Krakoa in House of X #1, he does so knowing that he had, in a previous reality, founded the Faraway, which fell to Sentinels in the end. When the X-Men stopped Mystique and the rest of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from killing Senator Kelly way back in Days of Future Past, Xavier went into that knowing that Sentinel technology seems to be inevitable. When the X-Men went up against Magneto in Cape Citadel way back in X-Men #1, they did this knowing that Magneto and his extremism would lead to disaster. Everything that Charles Xavier has done in the mainstream 616 Marvel Universe, he has done with the knowledge from Moira that a conflict between human and their robot sentinels and mutants seems like it is going to be inevitable. I think that that is going to lend itself to some very interesting developments in this story. For Moira 11 to exist, Moira 10 has to die. But if Moira 10 is to the point where she can die and be reborn, then it means Moira 9 is the key to making the decision that allows for Moira 11. So what's missing here is what allows Moira 11 to even exist. My last thing, Moira's many lives. In this issue, we see Moira on her 10th life. If we believe Destiny, and by the way, do we believe Destiny anyway? I mean, if somebody broke into my lab, destroyed my life and my work, told me some crazy portents about my future, and then burned me to death, I might be a little bit suspicious of what that person had told me. Anyway, if we believe Destiny, the only way that Moira won't be reincarnated is if she dies as a child before her mutant powers develop. So what this means is that Moira X has already earned her 11th life. Because if Moira were to die in the very next issue of House of X, she would get reincarnated because her mutant powers are there, and she would die and get reborn. So what I see is that in order for her to have not died as a child in her 10th life, which would end her sequence and would have been her 10th life, she did something in her 9th life in order to make it past the age of 13 in her 10th life, guaranteeing her an 11th life. So the right choice that she had to make likely has already been made at the end of her 9th life. It's not coming up in her 10th life. There is another way, however, that Moira X could die and not be reincarnated. She knows the mutant cure. She invented it in her 3rd life. That means she remembers how to make that mutant cure. She could make the cure, take it herself, and then die, because her mutant ability wouldn't be active and no reincarnation. And when I think about this, I think about Moira and her life and what she's trying to accomplish. Her ultimate goal would be to get to a point where she didn't want to be reincarnated and have a do-over, because she has finally done things as best she can to help mutants to grow, survive, and evolve, and thrive. This plane crash, it is suspicious, or is it sinister? Okay, and one more bonus thought. Moira II, that plane crash, seems a little suspicious to me. I don't know what's going on, but there's something maybe at work, maybe something sinister. I'll let you know if that's a pun in a couple months when this series wraps up. Hey, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Overthinking Comics. My name is Sean Neprud. I love to think about the comics that I read and I enjoy, and this issue did not disappoint. House of X #2 gave me so much to think about questions, think about the ramifications of, and think about what this means for the X-Men as a whole. I enjoyed making this video. I enjoyed sharing my thoughts and my questions that I have about this issue with you, and I am really enjoying House of X and Powers of 10. If they keep coming out with landmark bombshell issues like this, I'm probably going to have another episode or two to talk about those as well. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this, and remember, always overthink your comics. I'll see you again next time.